Welcome back, everyone. The next item we'll cover is going to be the three interpreters tools. So what are the three interpreters tools? What do we use them for? Before we get to that, in the previous lesson, we spent a lot of time talking about 5 interpreting skills. Do you remember why we use 5 interpreting skills again? We do it to interpret accurately and completely, right? Let me just put it up here so you remember what those 5 skills were. Then how about the three interpreters tools? Why or when should we use this? We use it when we want to ensure the accuracy and completeness, when we want to make sure that our rendition is truly accurate and complete. Let me try to visualize this. Do you like video games? I used to love playing video games when I was a kid. Especially the ones you grow your character and level up. Well, here, I'm going to say that my character is an interpreter. When we play this kind of game, you level up by fighting these slime-looking monsters, right? These slimy monsters are misinterpretations. Addition, omission, meaning alterations. So if I want to level up, what do? You see, my character has a sword in his hand. Well, this sword that I will use to attack these monsters, that's going to be the 5 interpreting skills that we just learned. But of course, these monsters are not going to just wait while I attack, so I have the shield to protect myself. That shield is going to be the 3 interpreters tools we are going to learn. In a sense, 5 interpreting skills is what we need to do our job. To interpret accurately and completely, we need to use our skills. But what if there are situations that will make it very difficult for us to do our job? We have to protect ourselves from those misinterpretations with a shield. That's going to be the 3 interpreters tools. Let's have a look at the first one. Interpreters tool number 1, repetition. Interpreters can ask our clients and LEP to repeat what they just said. I know that sounds really simple, right? But when and how to use this tool might not be so simple. So let me explain. We use this repetition tool when we didn't hear the utterance clearly. But why wouldn't we hear the utterance clearly? There could be 2 reasons. First, it could be a legitimate reason, right? We try to use the listening skill, but I don't know. There was an ambulance that passed by and you didn't hear what the client said. Maybe your headphones malfunctioned when the LEP was talking. In that case, we simply explain the situation and ask them to repeat what they said. But in real life, this might not be the only case. Maybe we didn't pay attention. Let's get one thing straight. This wouldn't happen in the first place if we paid attention, right? But in real life, this happens, and that's why I want to talk about this. Don't get me wrong, I don't want this to happen to you, but as an interpreter, it is bound to happen, in my opinion. And I think it is important for you to know what to do when this does happen. So let's say the client was talking and we weren't paying attention. We should have, but let's say we didn't. Now, it is your turn to provide a rendition, but you have no information in your head. What do you think we should do? Number 1, pretend like you heard the utterance and provide a random rendition as best as you can without asking for a repetition. Number 2, be honest, apologize for not paying attention, and ask for a repetition. 3, apologize to the client, explain that you were not able to hear due to an audio issue, and ask for a repetition. Well, I really hope you didn't pick number 1, because that's just straight up saying you are not going to do your job at all. If we don't know what we're interpreting, your rendition will not be accurate nor complete at all, so we can skip number 1. How about number 2 and number 3? I think here is where it gets tricky, and I don't want to call it the answer. This is my answer, and my answer is number 3. Surprise, right? I do respect the idea of being honest and apologizing, but when we are interpreting, I don't think this benefits us in any way. Once again, this is what I think, and people can definitely have different opinions on this, but from my experience, when this mistake happens, Just carefully throwing a white lie and say that you were not able to hear what they said because of other issues that you have no control of, and politely asking for a repetition is really the best way to preserve the flow of the call. I personally don't see a point admitting that you were not paying attention. If I were the client and this interpreter is asking me to repeat because they were not paying attention, I would simply want a different interpreter who is awake and able to pay attention. Once again, what you should have done was paying attention in the first place. Let's get this straight again. But I'm explaining this because this situation happens. And I know that many interpreters do this, and I'm not saying this is always the way to go. In fact, if you start abusing this and keep making up excuses like, there's an audio issue, you will very quickly lose that trust from your client and LEP. Even worse, you can get flagged by your LSP if this is way too frequent and severe. So long story short, don't abuse it. If this happens once in a while, this could be a witty way of getting away with this. If you constantly do this, this just shows that you lack what it takes to be an interpreter. If that was clear, let's have a look at how we use the repetition tool. Hi, doctor. Can I get a repetition, please? It's not how you properly use this tool. How about this? Hi, I'm really sorry. Could you please repeat what you said for me, please? Well, it sounds more polite for sure, but no, still not it. Then how do we ask for a repetition properly? Hi, this is the interpreter speaking. Could you please repeat what you said? Interpreter would like a repetition, please. Interpreter speaking, I apologize, but I was not able to hear you. Could you repeat what you just said? This is the proper way of using the tool. When we are using the interpreter tool, we always want to refer ourselves as an interpreter in third person speaking to let them know that we are the interpreter. Don't just say, sorry, I didn't catch that. Can you repeat? Or, oh, I'm so sorry. Could you say that again for me? Being a conduit, our default role means we are wearing the voice of the original speaker. When we go from the client to the LEP, we are the client who speaks the LEP's language. When we go from the LEP to the client, we are the LEP who speaks English. So we always keep things in the first person when we are interpreting. When we are not interpreting, that is when we are using these interpreters' tools, we must clarify that we are the interpreter to avoid any confusion. We will have a look at more examples later on, so let's move on to the next tool for now. Interpreters tool number 2, clarification. What's the clarification tool and when do we use it? This is used when interpreters did not understand the meaning of the utterance clearly, or when we believe that we need to double check something before we start interpreting. Let me give you some examples how we use this tool. Let's say we want to make sure that we got the last 4 digits of the account number that our client provided to the LEP. What's wrong with this rendition? We are not specifying that this is the interpreter, right? So we want to make sure we say, we are the interpreter. First, provide what we know and ask them to confirm if the information we have is correct or not. In this case, our client will say, oh, yes, that's correct, interpreter, or no, interpreter, that was 1952. Earlier I said we will use our repetition tool if we didn't hear the utterance clearly, right? But what if we heard almost everything, but not sure about just one piece of information or one specific part of the utterance? In that case, it's much better to specify the question and ask for a clarification instead of asking them to repeat the whole segment. So we can say, interpreter would like to clarify what you said. Did you say that the patient needs to see a hepatologist or a hematologist? Something like this. I hope you remember that this is what we talked about back when we were talking about the 4 roles of the interpreters. One of our roles was a clarifier, where we are going to make sure we understand the correct meaning of the utterance. If we ever have any doubts or uncertainties, we will come in as a clarifier, let them know that we are the interpreter, and we will ask them questions to clarify what has been said. The last and final tool is asking for shorter segments. Now, what does this mean? When I say shorter segments, I mean shorter sentences or smaller chunks. We use this tool when the utterance that's provided by our clients or LEPs is just too lengthy, and it is affecting our ability to interpret accurately and completely. So if the LEP and the client just keeps on talking and talking and talking, we cannot just rely on our interpreting skills, such as remembering or note-taking. We have to protect ourselves so that we can interpret accurately and completely. Let me give you some bad examples. Hi, this is the interpreter. Sorry, you're talking too much. I can't interpret if you talk like that. If you think that you will never ever talk like this to our clients or LEPs, well, think again, because you're probably wrong. You will be surprised by the number of interpreters, not even the ones that just started working, but experienced professional interpreters saying this to our clients and LEPs. I understand. We get frustrated. When we are trying to interpret, there are going to be people who just interrupt us, who ignore us, and who never stop talking. But still, this is not the way to do our job. Instead, we will professionally say, "This is the interpreter speaking. For more accurate interpretation, would you kindly speak in shorter sentences, please?" Although this tool is called asking for shorter segments, I personally do not use this term segment very often, just because it feels a little bit technical, and I have had people who didn't understand what I was asking. So instead, you can say shorter sentences, or you could also say, "Could you break down what you said into smaller pieces for the interpreter, please?" Something like that. Well, I hope this was all clear. Now, we are going to learn some basic rules of using these three tools in real life. I think these rules will be somewhat intuitive and something you will learn as you work. So I will try to keep it short and list some of the most common rules you should understand when we use the three interpreters tools. I'll have this on the side. Feel free to pause and read them, but I am literally about to explain them to you. So let's get started right away. Rule number 1, be professional. I think I already talked about this. How do we use these tools professionally? Let's say our client said, "Hello, Mr. Kim, may I have your..." I mean, what do? We are not going to just say, like the client did. We need to clarify what the client has said. Do we say, "What? Say it again"? I hope you know that this is not how we do or what we do. We use tools professionally. That means we start off by clearly telling them we are the interpreter. We also use formal language. We don't just say, "Yo, this is the interpreter, man. I didn't hear what you just said." No, that's not what we do. We say, "Hi, this is the interpreter. Could you repeat your question, please?" in a formal and professional manner. That's rule number 1 of using the interpreter's tools. Be professional. Rule number 2, inform the clients. What do I mean by this? Let's say this time our LEP spoke. "My date of birth is January 24th, 19 blah, blah, blah." Once again, we did not hear the utterance clearly, so what do we have to do? We say, "Hi, Mr. Kim, this is the interpreter speaking. Could you repeat your date of birth, please?" How about that? Is this okay? Is there anything wrong with this? Besides, of course, speaking in English to my LEP, which once again is just for a demonstration purpose in a language neutral version. I hope you remember what we talked about these square brackets. But anyway, what's wrong with this? Is there anything wrong with this? The answer is yes, there is something wrong with this. This is not how we do it. Let me explain. We're back to our LEP talking to us. LEP said, "My date of birth is January 24th, 19 blah, blah, blah." And we didn't understand that. If we indeed go ahead and say, hi, this is interpreter, could you repeat your date of birth, sir, to our LEP in our language, what happens? Our LEP will say, oh, I said my date of birth is January 24th, 1965. Can you not hear me well? And here, please notice that our client is confused because the LEP and the interpreter are just talking to each other. Then the interpreter explains why he had to ask LEP to repeat, which makes the client even more confused because the client cannot understand their language. Remember, they're talking in Korean or Spanish or Vietnamese or Somali, whatever the language you speak. This goes back and forth, and now the client is angry. They are so confused because something must be happening since my interpreter and my customer are just talking in their language, but I still haven't received the answer to the question, what is their date of birth? If this continues, sooner or later, your client will go burst in and yell, interpreter, what's going on? What is Mr. Kim saying? Did you get the date of birth? Something like this. Now you see what's going wrong. Remember, when we are working as a remote interpreter for a LSP, our customer is our client. Hence, the reason why we call them a client. Our customer is not an LEP. The LEP is our client's customer. I hope you still remember this. When we interpret in this setting, we actually prioritize our clients over our LEPs on many different things. One of the ways of prioritizing our clients over LEPs is by keeping them informed. We don't want our clients to be confused or not understanding what's happening in the conversation. That's why we always want to inform the client what is happening, but we don't necessarily do this to our LEPs. So let's go back to our original example. This is what the LEP said, and the interpreter didn't hear what the LEP said clearly. We can quickly inform the LEP by saying, sir, one moment, please. Or please wait one moment. One moment. Something quick to let the LEP know that they need to stop talking and the interpreter needs to figure something out. Then we say, hi, this is the interpreter. I was not able to hear what Mr. Kim just said. Would it be okay if I go ahead and ask him to repeat? Then the client will say, sure, yes, please, go ahead. That's when we stop and use the tool on the LEP. Sir, could you please repeat what your date of birth? Only when we have informed the client what's happening and we have their permission to proceed. I know having this idea that we always have to have the permission from our clients to ask a question to our LEP feels a little bit ridiculous. I totally understand if you feel that way. However, one way to understand this is considering it as a preventive measure. If you have been with a group of people who speak in a different language that you don't understand, you know how uncomfortable it can be sometimes. Even if they were talking about something that has nothing to do with you, you can easily misunderstand that and think maybe they are laughing at you because we don't know what they're talking about. We do not want our clients to feel that way ever. That's the reason why we always inform the clients what we are doing when we have to step outside of our role as a conduit and taking a role of a clarifier. I hope this is clear. Rule number 3, do not use interpreter jargon. We actually talked about this when we first learned the jargon, like the term client, LSP, or LEP in the very first chapter, remember? Let me quickly go over this with an example this time. Our LEP is telling us the date of birth, once again, and we couldn't hear it. We just learned that instead of getting back to the LEP right away, we have to inform the client first, right? So we say, hello client, this is the interpreter. I couldn't hear what the LEP just said. Would it be okay if I ask the LEP to repeat? You see what's going on here, right? We never use interpreter jargon. Why? Because they will not understand it. Up until this point, I have been using these terms so frequently, you are probably quite comfortable now with terms like LEP, utterance, short or source language. However, these are not the terms that we use when we are on a call, because once again, no one will understand you. If you say LEP, your client is not going to understand what that means. If you say the word client in your language to the LEP, most likely they will get confused because they don't understand why you would call this English speaking representative from TD Bank a client. So instead, we want to make sure that we use the proper terms to replace interpreter jargon. As I mentioned before, I personally use the terms like representative or agent to address our clients if it is a customer service call. It's usually a bit easier if it is a medical call, then we can call them doctor or nurse. Or their first or last name if you have it. I think many people will agree we do call other people by their name in English, but this might not be the case for the other language that you speak. Before, I briefly talked about this specific Korean term, 선생님, which literally means a teacher, to address someone who is older, to show respect in a gender-neutral way. Maybe you have something like this in your language. I know in some languages you use terms that are equivalent to sir or ma'am. I have heard some people say brother or sister in their language for this purpose. Or maybe you don't have anything like this. Once again, because I don't speak 7,139 different languages, I cannot tell each one of you how to address your LEPs in a call. What's a good way to find out? Think about a conversation that you would have with a customer service representative in your language. That will usually help you find the right word for it. Rule number 4, be transparent. Once again, the same example here, the LEP is talking and we cannot understand, so we have to use a tool. Would it be okay if we just say, this is the interpreter, one moment? No, we should not do this. The reason behind this is because this shows that we are not being transparent to our client. When I say we're not being transparent, it means we are not informing our client clearly enough. It is our job to be transparent and let our client know what we are doing when we are using the tools. So we say, interpreter was not able to hear the date of birth Mr. Kim provided. Would it be okay if I ask him to repeat? This is how we are going to do it. We keep the transparency up by explicitly letting our clients know why we are using the tool so that they are kept in the loop and not lost in the conversation. Rule number 5, provide a solution. I told you that I often monitor our other interpreters' calls as a quality assurance specialist, right? I remember this one specific incident. The LEP was saying something which was not heard clearly by the LEP, I believe. Then the interpreter started saying this to the client. Hi, this is the interpreter speaking. I can't understand what he's saying. Please don't do this. Please, please, please don't do this. All of these tools that we learned, this is essentially an action taken by the interpreter, correct? It means we are taking this action proactively to protect ourselves from any misinterpretation. So when there is a problem, you state the problem to make it transparent to our client. And you provide a solution so the conversation can continue. Don't ever just say, hi, interpreter can't understand, and stop there. If you didn't understand what the LEP said, what do you need to say? You need to provide a solution. You say, interpreter couldn't understand. May I ask your customer to repeat what he said? Remember, don't just state the problem, provide a solution as well. Here is the rule number 6. Use multiple tools if possible. What does this mean? Let's say our client is asking a long question. Hello, may I have your full name, date of birth, your address, and your phone number, blah, blah, blah. And let's say the interpreter didn't pay attention or couldn't hear the utterance clearly. So what should we do here? We should use the interpreter's tool, right? So the interpreter uses the tool. Hi, interpreter speaking. Can you repeat? What tool did we use? A repetition tool. Is there anything wrong with this? I mean, we're still being professional since we clearly stated that we're the interpreter. We're not throwing in jargon like clients or LEP, so that's also fine. I guess we could a bit more transparent, but that really isn't the issue here in my opinion. Then what is the problem? Think about this. You are having a conversation with your friend or family. You're telling them this really funny and interesting story you know they are just going to love. When you finish the story, you expect them to be like, oh, that's crazy. Or, oh, I can't believe that happened. Something like that. But instead, this is what they say. Sorry, can you say it again? How do you feel? If it happens once, maybe it's okay. Twice or more, I think you will start getting really annoying. That's exactly what's going to happen on our call. After our client asks all of those questions, whether it is short or long, if you just go, sorry, I couldn't hear you. Can you repeat? You are bound to get our clients annoyed. And we don't want that. We want to satisfy our clients, not annoy them. I am not saying all clients will snap and say things like, do your job properly. Although you'll be surprised how many rude clients we encounter every day. The point is, we don't want this to happen. We never want to upset people, especially if there's something we can do to change or prevent this from happening. So instead, you could say this. Hi, interpreter speaking. I apologize. I believe I missed some of the information you just asked. You asked his name, date of birth, and what else did you need again? There, what did I just do? I basically asked for a repetition. Since I asked the client to say what they said again, I also asked them to check if I got some of the information correctly, which I know I did because I managed to write down name and date of birth in my notes. Now the client is not mad. They will give us what we need without getting upset or annoyed. This is how we want to use our tools. And being able to do this is going to make you look really professional, even on your first call on your first day. This time, this is a doctor. This doctor is talking so much and just spitting out so much information. It is hard to keep up with just remembering and note-taking. What do? We got to ask them to slow down or give us workable short segments, right? But once again, if we just say, this is an interpreter, you speak too much. Can you speak in shorter sentences? This is just not going to bring us what we need. In fact, the client might not be able to give us the exactly same information if we do that. When you're just having a conversation with someone, you're usually not expected to repeat what you just said. So even if it has been just seconds, you repeating what you just said might not exactly be the same as your first time. You might think this is beyond our control as an interpreter, but there is definitely our part in this, in my opinion. When we just blame our clients and LEPs for miscommunications without actively taking actions to prevent miscommunication from happening, this will definitely bring down the satisfaction they will have and which we do not want. So if this is not the way to do it, then how should we do it? We do this. I know, it's very long. So just to keep things short, what do? We give them what we have. We tell them what we heard. We tell them what we didn't hear. We ask them if what we heard is correct or incorrect. We get them to double check. We ask them to repeat. We ask them to clarify. We ask them to shorten the sentence for us. We don't have to do this one at a time. That will not be very effective. This can be all combined. What I wrote here is not a script that you have to remember. What I want you to practice is this professional and formal ways of talking to our clients and LEPs. I made this silly meme, but this really, this is exactly what I want you to understand. When we combine our tools and speak in coherent manner, that's when we essentially become invincible. Remember I was telling you that using our tools is like protecting ourselves with a shield from these monsters, right? Now we know how to use these tools properly that will protect us from these slimy monsters, whether it is a lengthy, confusing utterance or difficult medical terms that you don't know. Being able to do this will really make you feel secure and less anxious when we're interpreting. In my opinion, this is how you can prepare yourself for your first interpreting work experience. Don't get me wrong, studying medical terminology, learning about the industry, working on your note-taking skills, all of those are important. But that's not something that you will be able to do in a day. But understanding how these tools work and practicing how you would use them in real life will make all the difference. I would like you to try it yourself. Like literally say it out loud. Hi, this is the interpreter speaking. Could you please repeat what you said? Practice again and then again until it's in your system, in your muscle memory. Excuse me, this is the interpreter. Could you clarify what you meant by 3 pills a day after meals? Something like this. I really hope I made this clear.